Everyone, we're going to get started. I'm Hillary Miller, one of the school counselors here. I think I recognize all of you. We have two presenters tonight. Mr. Ed Lane, he is from the Pennsylvania Higher Education Assistance Agency. He's going to be talking to you. He's the expert in all financial things, really great guy who has a lot of good information for you. And then we have Selena from the TFEC, the Foundation for Enhancing Communities, and she's going to speak just briefly first with you, and then we'll get right into the nitty-gritty of the presentation. Okay.
Good evening. I feel like I don't need this except they're doing live streams, so I do need it. But thank you everybody for coming. Thank you for Mrs. Miller to having me. I just want to talk to you a couple minutes about TFEC and what we offer to the students. We offer scholarships mainly in the 5 counties of Cumberland, Perry, Lebanon, Dauphin, and Franklin, and then Northern York in the Dillsburg area. We do have a couple little outliers, but we have a lot of scholarships in this area for students. So what we do typically is come out here to the high school, and we will be coming February 11th for what we call an application assist day. So seniors, if you're here, you might want to jot that down and make sure to check with your counselor to sign up for that. And we'll come out and we'll help the students fill out what we call our high school senior universal application. It's one longer application. It takes about a half an hour to 40 minutes to fill it out. When you submit it, it tells you then which scholarships you're eligible to apply for. So possibly 7, 8 scholarships that you'll be eligible for. Then you want to complete the additional essays, letter of rec, if you're an artist or a musician, maybe a portfolio, something along those lines. We also have what we call standalone scholarships, and we have about 35 of those. Those are maybe different majors or funky outlying kind of deadlines like the summer or fall. So those are something we'd want your seniors to look at also. But the majority of the scholarships that they're eligible for, are going to be in the high school universal application. That being said, if they win a TFEC scholarship, they are eligible for what we call a FIA Path match, and that can be for up to $5,000. If they win a $3,000 scholarship with us and they go to school in-state full-time, they can be eligible to win that also. So it's a nice little benefit to winning a TFEC scholarship. Those are need-based, so they would be only for students who have financial need. And that has shifted a little bit. I think they consider now more the cost of your college and everything. So TFEC has been around for over 125 years. And is anybody here familiar with TFEC? I'm just curious. Yay, we have one. We're the best known secret around. So we did last year over $2.1 million in local scholarships. So you definitely want to pay attention because we have a total of over 200 scholarships. Some of those are selected by the counselors or school staff, and you guys actually have a couple of those here that East Penn school counselors would select you for. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I'm pretty quick and to the point because the biggest thing for your kiddos is going to be to show up at that application assist day. And what we do there that day is not just help them fill out the application, we also give them helpful tips for how to make their application stand out and get noticed. And that is important when you're competing against, maybe hundreds of kids. So does anybody have any questions? Yeah. The match part, yeah. So our scholarships are need-based, but we really look very heavily at not just low income, but also middle-class people, because we understand that if you're going to a school that's $30,000 a year, most of us can't pay that out of pocket, right? Any other questions? Anybody? Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Ed then. Thanks for having me.
Thanks. Thank you. Thank you so much, Selena. Thank you, Mrs. Miller, for inviting me again this year. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out. My name is Ed Lane. I am a higher education access partner with FIA. I am one of 13 access partners across the state. I cover Adams, Cumberland, Franklin, Fulton, and York counties. So this is my territory. With the agency, and just to give you a little background, FIA is the Pennsylvania Higher Education Assistance Agency. We're a state-related agency, so we do outreach for the state. So we do things like administer grants and scholarships for the state of Pennsylvania. The state doesn't do that themselves. They use us as the go-between. So we administer those programs for the state of Pennsylvania. So that is what we do as an agency. Specifically, Access Partners, we do outreach. The mission at FIA is to provide affordable access to higher education for families and students in Pennsylvania. That's where we come in as Access Partners. We come out, we help you work through the financial aid process. We tell you how to get funding for school. So that's kind of what we do as Access Partners. We're another resource for you. Everything that FIA does for the students and families in the state of Pennsylvania is all free. It doesn't cost you anything. So please feel free to use us as a resource. I'm another resource for you. In addition to the folks in the counseling office, clearly when you look around, there's a lot of students and not that many folks in the counseling office. So they can only do so much. They get overwhelmed because there are a lot of you, especially when you get to your senior year and you're looking at college applications, financial aid applications, all of those things. That's a lot of work for a small office. So we're just another resource to help them out. That's my contact information on the screen. That's my phone number, my email address. I promise I do get back to you if you call or email me. This time of year, it's not the same day. It usually takes 2 or 3 days. It takes a little bit of time to get back to you. If it's longer than that and you don't hear from me, call or email me back. Sometimes things end up in my spam folder a lot more often recently than in the past. So I try to check that at least once a week. That also happens slower this time of year. I do these appointments pretty much every night of the week. So we do a lot of outreach throughout the fall. I'm booked all the way through Christmas. So we do lots and lots and lots of outreach because this is the main focus of our division at FIA. Prior to joining the agency, I joined FIA in May of 2024. I worked at an institution. I worked for 10 years in their financial aid office, or 16 years in the financial aid office, and I was in their business office for 10 years before that. So I spent 26 years of my career in higher ed. So the bulk of my professional career was in higher education before this opportunity came along, and I jumped at this because this is so much more opportunity for me to outreach to way more students than I ever could just working at one institution. So if you guys have questions about the financial aid process, about the billing process, how admissions and applications work, I've worked in all of those areas. So please, again, feel free to reach out, contact me. I can certainly answer any questions you have. It doesn't just have to be about FIA grants or about, the Pennsylvania State Grant or what we administer for the state. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I'm glad to assist you. This is kind of a breakdown of what we're going to look at this evening. I know the last thing on there says questions. Don't wait until the end. If you guys have a question while we're going through the presentation, raise your hand. I'll gladly answer your questions as we go through. 2 reasons. Number one, I want to make sure we answer your questions before you leave tonight. That's the most important part about coming here this evening. And secondly, I have about 50 slides in this program. And if you have a question when we get to slide 7, 8, 9, and you wait until the end, you're going to forget what it was. And then you're going to have to email the counseling office or reach out to them. I want to make sure that we answer your questions so you don't have to go through an extra step to get your questions answered. So please feel free to raise your hand. I will gladly answer those. I will still answer questions at the end, and I'll hang out afterwards. If you have any questions that you don't want to ask in front of the group, I'll answer any individual questions you have as well. Now, with all that out of the way, we'll start talking about everything that we're going to talk about tonight. Since we're going to talk about financial aid, the first thing that I should do is give you a definition of what financial aid is. Simply put, financial aid is all the financial resources that you use to pay for your post-secondary education. Grants, scholarships, loans, work study, all of that falls under the category of financial aid. The next thing that they point out on the slide, that paying for school is the joint responsibility of the parent and the student. For students, that doesn't mean that it's your parents' job or responsibility to pay for your post-secondary education. All that simply means is that when you fill out your FAFSA, it's going to ask for parent information along with student information on that form. So it's going to look at parent income, assets, all of those things to determine your financial aid eligibility. The other things on the screen, not every family qualifies for need-based aid. So you're not necessarily going to get free grant money for school. That doesn't mean you can't still get free money. There are scholarships that are available. We have a slide a little bit later. I'll explain to you the difference between the two. Just to keep in mind, just because you don't qualify for a grant which typically the FAFSA is used as your application to determine those grant eligibilities. So I'll have families go, then why would I waste my time filling out the FAFSA? Because it's not just grant applications. There's other places that use the FAFSA for eligibility for funding. So you still want to fill out the FAFSA even if you think you might not be eligible for grants, because there are other opportunities, and I'll explain that too as we go through the program. Some of the other things on the screen, there's other requirements that you're going to have to meet in order to maintain eligibility for school. So as to show of hands, how many of you have students who are seniors this year? Anybody who's not a senior? Oh, awesome. So you guys are all in the middle of the process now. So for seniors, the only steps that you have to do in order to qualify for financial aid for your senior year as you're moving into your first year of college is complete your FAFSA and fill out your admissions applications for the colleges that you want to go to. That's it. After you do that, all your financial aid eligibility is going to kick in and you'll have financial aid for your first year in college. When you go on to your second year, you have to refill out the FAFSA. So, I'll give you a spoiler, there's a slide later that's going to tell you you have to fill out the FAFSA every year. So there's a preview to a slide that you're going to see later. You have to fill out the FAFSA every year. That's not enough to get your financial aid for your second, third, fourth years in college. You also have to meet what they call academic progress. The federal government defines that as you have to maintain at least a 2.0 GPA, so you have to have at least a C average, and you have to complete at least 67% of your attempted credits. And you have to meet both. If you fail either one of those, you fail academic progress and you don't qualify for financial aid. So you can have a 4.0 GPA, and if you don't meet the 67% attempted to completed ratio, you don't qualify for financial aid because you failed academic progress. I point that out because in high school, you don't really have the opportunity to drop classes. In college, you do. You can talk to your academic advisor. You can talk to the registrar's office. If you're struggling with the class, the first thing that they're going to tell you is just drop it. It's going to save your GPA. They're 100% right. It will. You're going to get a W on your transcript, which doesn't count against your GPA. It does, however, count against your attempted to completed credit ratio. So if you attempt 12 credits and drop 6 of them, you can get a 4.0 for that semester, but you've only completed 50% of your attempted credits and you're no longer financially eligible for aid. So I drug that out just to tell you, before you drop classes because an academic advisor tells you or someone in the registrar's office tells you to drop a class, stop in the financial aid office, talk to those folks, because they're going to tell you how it's going to affect your pocketbook. Don't just drop classes because an academic advisor says, hey, it's a good idea to drop this because your GPA is going to suffer if you keep it. That may be the case, but it might not be as detrimental as dropping those classes. So that's just something to keep in mind. The last piece on this screen is the most important thing. Get your students involved in this process for 2 reasons. Number one, it's going to help you as a parent. And the reason that I say that is once your students graduate from high school, there's a law that kicks into place. It's called the FERPA law. It's the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. Right now, as parents, you own your student's academic record. So you can call the school with any questions you have. You can call the counseling office if you have questions about their classes, their grades. You can call their teachers. You can call the main office. Anybody at the high school will talk to you about your student's record. The minute that your student leaves school here, they either graduate or turn 18, they own their academic record, and nobody at a college will talk to you about that. And the only time that you're going to hear about that is probably when you go to either an accepted student day or a new student day, and they're going to fill you in and go, we can't answer any questions for you in any of our offices. The only way that schools can do it is if they offer a FERPA release form. Those forms are specific in 2 ways. Number one, they're specific as to the person who was on the form. So students have to fill those out for any single person that calls in. So there's no blanket form that says you can talk to anybody about my record. They fill out that form and say, you can talk to Bill Smith, who is my dad, about my financial aid offers. That's how specific they are. So if you don't sign it for every single office, if your dad, Bill Smith, calls the financial aid office and then gets transferred to the billing office and asks about your bill and you didn't sign a FERPA release for the billing office, they're not going to give them any information. So those forms have to be filled out for every single office on campus. Most large schools do not maintain those records because they are that specific. So if you're looking at a school that's got enrollment of 30, 40, 50,000 students, they're more than likely not going to maintain FERPA release forms, so your student is going to be the only person that school will talk to. So if you don't get your students involved now, it's going to be harder for you in the long run. And I can tell you from experience, students will walk into the office, and if they don't know what's happening, they're going to come into the office wherever it is. I can tell you from financial aid, students will walk in and say, my mom, dad, grandma, whoever's taking care of the bill has a question about my financial aid. And you'll ask the student, what's your question? And they'll stand there and go, they just told me to come here. That doesn't help your student, and it certainly doesn't help you. You're going to get frustrated, and it's not that the school isn't trying to help, but if your student doesn't know what's happening, they can't help you. So I spend a lot of time on one bullet point, but it's that important for you. I just want to make sure that you're not frustrated as your student moves through their college career. This screen kind of looks at what the financial aid office uses to determine your financial aid eligibility. There's a couple of different pieces that they need to determine that. All the way on the left is what they call cost of attendance, or COA. And as you look at the program we're looking at, you're going to see lots of different acronyms. The financial aid office speaks their own language. They use acronyms for everything. The FAFSA is an acronym. FAFSA stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. So anytime that you're looking at something, if it's an acronym that you're not sure what it means, Google it, you'll probably find it. If you can't figure out what it is, email me, I'll let you know what the school's talking about. The cost of attendance is super important. Every school has to come up with this number every year. There's two components that build cost of attendance. There's direct costs and indirect costs. Your direct costs are the things that your school is going to bill you for. Tuition and fees are going to be on there. If your student's living on campus, housing and food plans will be on there. The other piece that they have to put on is what they call indirect costs, and those are estimated costs for the school. Those are going to be books and supplies, transportation costs, and miscellaneous student expenses. Those two components build cost of attendance at every single institution. Up until last year, the only place that you would ever see cost of attendance is if you looked at a school's financial aid page, and that's the only place you ever saw cost of attendance listed on a website at a college. That is no longer the case. As of 2024, the Financial Transparency Act was passed. That requires each institution to now post their cost of attendance on their website, any place that they talk about tuition. So anytime you're looking at a school's website, if it mentions tuition, it's either going to have that cost of attendance number, or it's going to have a link to their cost of attendance calculation page so you can see what the school's cost of attendance is. The reason for that is it makes it easier for you as a consumer to compare costs and make sure that you're looking at cost of attendance versus cost of attendance at every institution you're looking at, and not comparing cost of attendance at school A to tuition at school B and thinking that school B is a whole lot less expensive, when the truth of the matter is you're missing some of those costs. So that's the reason that exists. So when you see cost of attendance, just know that all those components are built into that cost. You're going to see some of them on your tuition bill, and other ones are going to be estimated costs for each institution that you're looking at. The next piece that's on there is the Student Aid Index, or SAI. That's basically just a measure of your family's financial strength. It is the result of your FAFSA. So once your FAFSA is completed, it's going to calculate your Student Aid Index. Once the financial aid office has your FAFSA results and that Student Aid Index number, they can start to calculate your financial need. The basic financial aid need calculation is down on the right-hand side of the screen. Cost of attendance minus your Student Aid Index. And then the last piece the school will use is what they subtract your OFA, or other financial assistance, and that's any other non-federal aid that you're receiving. So any other grant scholarships that you're receiving that are not from the federal government, they subtract that. And that's your need at each institution, and that's what financial aid offices use to build your financial aid package at each school. When they're putting your financial aid offers together, there's different categories of financial aid that go onto those offers. The first piece is what they call gift aid. That's everybody's favorite kind of financial assistance. That's free money. Those are funds that you typically do not repay. There's two different kinds that go into gift aid. There's grants and scholarships. Grants are based on need. So again, they're going to look at something like your FAFSA to determine eligibility. So when we look back to that first slide that said not every family qualifies for need-based aid, that's what they're talking about. But you can still get free money for school. You get those through scholarships. Scholarships are what they call merit-based funding. Merit is not need-based. So that's looking at some other criteria in order to determine your eligibility. If you have really good grades, you can qualify for a merit scholarship. If you're an athlete, you can qualify for athletic scholarships. If you have any other talent, sing, dance, play an instrument, those are all things that can qualify you for scholarship funding. So again, Just because you don't qualify for grant funding doesn't mean you can't get free funding for school. So that's something to keep in mind. There are other ways to get free money for school other than grants. The next category of financial assistance that goes on financial aid offers is what they call, I just lost my train of thought there, self-help aid. So with self-help aid, that requires students to perform some sort of action to receive that funding. There's a couple of different pieces that go into the self-help aid category. Loans fall under there, so students have to complete the FAFSA. They're eligible to receive their federal student loans. Those are a guaranteed loan, so as long as the student completes their FAFSA, they're eligible to receive those loan funds from the federal government. Students can get $5,500. It's their first year in college. So that's money that students can get just by filling out the FAFSA. It's self-help aid because they have to repay that. So it's not free money, you have to pay that back. So that's why the loans fall under the self-help aid category. Work study also falls into self-help aid. Work study is what they call a campus-based aid program. So campuses can participate in work study. They can get funding from the federal or the state government, and they can pay students to work part-time jobs on campus. One thing to keep in mind with work study is while it is maintained through the financial aid office and it shows up on your financial aid offers, it doesn't reduce your tuition at most schools. You have to work in order to receive the money. So as you work each pay period, the school will pay you a paycheck just like a part-time job until you meet the amount of funding that they offered you in work study. So there's ways to get that money, but it doesn't come off your tuition bill. So even though it's on your financial aid offer, you don't want to subtract those from your tuition costs. There's tuition reimbursement plans that fall in here. So if your student or parents work for employers that will pay tuition back, that's another way that you can get self-help aid. And military service also pays. So if your student signs up to be in the U.S. Armed Forces, they can get VA benefits to help pay their tuition as well. There's different places that give out funding. The federal government is one place that gives out grant funding for students. There's two main grants that the federal government offers. One is the federal Pell Grant. Qualification for the Pell Grant comes from filling out your FAFSA. So once you fill out the FAFSA, get your student aid index. If your student aid index qualifies for a Pell Grant, that'll show up on your financial aid offers at schools. The maximum Pell Grant is currently $7,395. The way to qualify for a maximum Pell Grant is to have a minimum student aid index. The minimum student aid index is a negative $1,500. So when you complete your FAFSA, if your student aid index is a negative 1,500, you'll qualify for the $7,395 Pell Grant. That is what is called an entitlement grant. And what that means is no matter where your student goes to school, doesn't matter what state, it doesn't matter what the cost of attendance at the school is, your student aid index is the same at every single school. So your Pell Grant eligibility is the same at every single school. So you're entitled to those funds no matter where you go to school. The second piece that's on there is the federal FSEOG, or Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant. That is not an entitlement grant. That is what they call a campus-based grant. So again, like work study, it's a campus-based fund. Schools get a block of money each year if they participate in the program, and then they're allowed to award those funds out to students within the federal guidelines. Federal guidelines for FSEOG say that the minimum award offer is $500, so they can't award less than $500 a year. The most they can award is $4,000 per year. So they can award students anywhere between those two amounts that they choose to. They also have to offer it to students who are Pell Grant eligible. So if you're not eligible to receive a Pell Grant, you can't get an FSEOG grant. And they have to consider the most needy students first. So students who have the minimum student aid index or maximum Pell Grant eligibility. So as long as schools follow those guidelines, they can award those funds any way that they see fit. Point that out. So when you're looking at financial aid offers from schools, you may see an FSEOG grant on an offer from one school and not on other school offers. Two reasons for that is the schools that don't have it on there either don't participate in the program or you didn't qualify on the way that they award funding. So just keep in mind that just because you see an FSEOG award from one school, you may not see it from every school you apply to. And they could be in different amounts. It could be anywhere from $500 to $4,000. The state of Pennsylvania also has grant funds that they offer. The largest is the Pennsylvania State Grant. Again, FIA administers this for the state. The current maximum Pennsylvania State Grant is $5,750 per year. That is not an entitlement grant either. There's two pieces that build qualification for your Pennsylvania State Grant. One is your student aid index, and the other piece is the cost of attendance at the schools you attend. The next slide will explain that a little bit. There are states that participate in reciprocation with the Pennsylvania State Grant. Massachusetts, Ohio, Delaware, West Virginia, Vermont, and the District of Columbia. If you go to school in one of those states or in Washington, D.C., you can receive part of your Pennsylvania State Grant eligibility. Maximum eligibility is $600 per year, which is vastly different from $5,750. So if you want to stretch your eligibility for your Pennsylvania State Grant funds, staying in state is going to give you more eligibility for those Pennsylvania State Grant funds than going to one of the reciprocating states. The only caveat to that is for students who are veterans of the armed forces. If they go to one of the reciprocating states, they can get an $800 state grant reciprocal. This is what I was talking about with the cost tiers. In order to receive maximum eligibility, your student aid index has to qualify and your cost of attendance has to be at least $29,001 or more to receive the maximum Pennsylvania State Grant amount. As your cost of attendance goes down, maximum state grant eligibility also reduces because that's one of the components to determine eligibility. Again, we point that out so that when you're looking at your financial aid offers from schools, you're going to see different Pennsylvania State Grant estimates. Doesn't mean that the schools made a mistake. It means that's where they're falling on that cost tier. This is a list of some of the other programs that FIA administers for the state. This is not an extensive or exhaustive list. We have some other grants besides these. This is just a sampling of our grants. If you go to FIA.org, you can see all of the grants that we administer. As Selena had mentioned, we do have our Partnership for Access to Higher Education, or our PATH grant. That is a matching grant that will match partner grants up to $5,000. Again, students do have to have financial need for those. So again, it goes back to that second slide, cost of attendance minus the student aid index minus other financial assistance. If that difference is $5,000 or more, they can get up to the $5,000 match. Our newest grant is the Grow PA Grant Scholarship Program. That's a grant that's a $5,000 grant per year for students. It's for students who want to enter high need fields. So those fields are determined by the Pennsylvania Department of Labor and Industry. Again, if you go to FIA.org, you can see all the qualifying programs. Students can get $5,000 per year on top of their Pennsylvania State Grant. So if you're Pennsylvania State Grant eligible, you can also receive the Grow PA scholarship grant on top of that. The only caveat to this grant is you also have to perform at least 1 year of work in the state of Pennsylvania in the program that you studied under for each year that you receive the grant. If you don't meet that work requirement, that grant reverts to a loan. Loan interest rates are anywhere from 0 to 4.5% on the loans. For students who are to qualify this year, it's a 0% loan, so they're not charging anything for the first year of the program. So it's a really good opportunity for students. Next, we'll look at the 5 steps to the financial aid process. We did talk about the first one a little bit. You're going to want to look for that free money first. So again, since you are all seniors or parents of seniors in this room, other than the FAFSA, this is the most important thing that you're going to do this year. These are funds that are going to help you offset your out-of-pocket costs. Again, they're free monies. It's money that you don't repay. It's better than paying money that you've already earned out of pocket, and it's better than taking loans to pay for school. So that is why these are so important. They're available from lots of different sources. Again, there's national scholarships, there's local scholarships. So again, watch for emails from the counseling office. Those typically start to come out later in the year, December, January. The TFEC scholarships are great. Again, those are partner scholarships, so they can be matched through the PATH program. Out on the table, if you didn't grab the papers coming in, there's a scholarship flyer out there. On the back of that page, there's some national scholarship databases to sign up for scholarships. So there's lots of different places to look for those funds. Again, they're not only available now, so starting during your senior year, you can apply for those. Some of those scholarships can be applied for as early as student sophomore year in high school. So that's something that you can start before you even get to your senior year. The thing that we want to point out on this slide is you can do this every year. And I encourage you to do that. While you're in high school, applying for scholarships is easy because your parents are telling you to apply for scholarships. The counseling office is telling you to apply for scholarships. You come to programs like this, the folks at TFEC tell you to apply for scholarships. I'm telling you to apply for scholarships. Once you go off to college, nobody's going to push you to apply for scholarships. That is something that's going to have to be up to the students. If you don't keep applying for scholarships, if you get a scholarship in your first year that helps reduce your out-of-pocket cost and you don't apply for a new scholarship to replace that, if it's not a renewable scholarship fund, you're going to either have to pay that difference out of pocket or borrow that money. So this is the easiest way to reduce your debt, is by applying for those free funds. So make sure you're taking advantage of those opportunities. The next thing we'll look at is the different deadlines that are out there. And I would love to tell you there's one deadline for everything that you're going to fill out. There's not. Every single thing that you do has a different deadline. All the scholarships have different deadlines. When you're filling out the FAFSA, there's a different deadline for everybody who uses the FAFSA as your application. The federal government uses the FAFSA as your application. The state uses it as their application, and most schools use it as their application. For everybody who is a senior, the federal deadline is June 30th of 2027. Do not wait until then to fill out your FAFSA, or you're going to miss everybody else's deadline. The state deadline is May 1st. It's May 1st for all renewal students. So as I mentioned earlier, you have to do the FAFSA every year. You have to do all renewal applications by May 1st when the application comes out. So applications open October 1st. They're due by May 1st for your Pennsylvania state grant. That is a hard and fast deadline. What that means is if you meet every other qualifier and you file your FAFSA on May 2nd, you don't get your Pennsylvania state grant because you missed the deadline. So that is, if you don't remember anything else tonight, make sure you remember that you have to refile your FAFSA by May 1st every single year. And my suggestion is file it at least a week before that, because if you run into a problem, you still have time to fix it. Because if you miss that deadline again, you miss your state grant eligibility. The only time that there is a different deadline is for seniors in their students in their senior year of high school. If they're applying to a school that's under that August 1st deadline, you can fill out by August 1st for your first year of the application and still receive your funds. So if you're going to go to a community college, a college with open admissions, which basically means they accept everybody who applies, nobody gets denied admission to the school. You go to a business, trade, or tech school, hospital, school, and nursing, or a school that has a 2-year non-transferable or terminal degree, you can apply by August 1st for your first year only and still get your Pennsylvania state grant. The one thing I will caution you is that if your student is planning on attending one of those types of schools and they're waiting until June to fill out their FAFSA or July to fill out their FAFSA, and all of their friends decide that they're going to go to Millersville, and your student comes to you on June 30th and goes, you know what, I changed my mind, I'm going to Millersville too. They missed their May 1st deadline. They're going to have to fill out an appeal for their Pennsylvania state grant. And there's never a guarantee that you're going to get an appeal approved. So make sure you fill out the FAFSA as early as possible. Definitely fill it out before May 1st so you never have to file an appeal for it. I know we keep pointing out deadlines. I have a couple of slides on these, but it truly is that important that you don't want to miss the deadlines, because if you miss your deadline for any of these application pieces, you lose that opportunity for that funding. So again, schools have different deadlines. Schools use the FAFSA. So you want to look at each school that you're interested in attending or applying to. Look to see if the school has a priority deadline for the FAFSA, because like I said, the federal government's deadline is June 30th of 2027. The FIA deadline is May 1st of 2026. Schools can have any deadline they want. Some schools will put a deadline as early as November 15th. So you have to have the FAFSA done within 45 days of it opening. Check the schools. So the deadline you want to make sure you file the FAFSA by is whoever has the earliest completion date. That way you make sure you're maximizing all of your opportunities for funds, because if you miss the deadline for the school, they're not going to give you any eligibility for their institutional awards. So you want to make sure that you're looking at each of those schools. Whoever's got the earliest deadline date, that's when you want to make sure your FAFSA is in by. What we point out on this side is you don't have to wait until your student applies or is accepted to the school. If it's a school that you're interested in attending, check to make sure if they do have a priority deadline, just put them on your FAFSA anyway. It won't hurt to send them your data. If you don't apply or if you don't get accepted, they can't put together your financial aid offer anyway. But at least you send them the information so you can be considered for their eligibility. keep talking about the FAFSA. We'll actually look at some of the things on the FAFSA now. And we don't just keep reminding you to do the FAFSA, do the FAFSA, do the FAFSA, because we want you to fill out an extra federal form. This is the reason we keep telling you do the FAFSA, do the FAFSA, do the FAFSA. It's the application for all of your federal aid. It's the application for all of your state aid, and most schools use it for their institutional aid. So this one application is going to get you most of your financial aid eligibility. That's why we put so much emphasis on do your FAFSA. It's not because we just want to see you do one more form. It's because we want to make sure you're getting all the opportunity for funding that exists for you out there. This is a list of folks who have to be on your student's FAFSA beside your student. So when you fill out the FAFSA, it is the student's form. That's something that confuses parents, because parents, again, like to get things done because there's deadlines. It is the student's FAFSA. So when you fill out the form, it is actually the student's form. It's going to be based off the student's information first. It will allow you to start the form as a parent. I encourage families to let the student start. Last year, we ran into not that there were a lot of problems with the parent inviting the student to finish the form if the parent started it, but any of the issues we saw was the parent starting the form and then inviting the student. The form seems to work better if the students start first and then invite the parents. The student part is also the longest part of the form, so you get the hardest part done first if the students start the form. On the side where it says yes, those are folks in addition to the student who is going to have to put information on the FAFSA. So if your biological parents are married and living together, if they filed a joint tax return, only one parent has to be on the FAFSA. If they file separate returns, they both have to be on the form. If your biological parents are unmarried and living together, they can't file a joint return, so they both have to be on the FAFSA. Divorced or separated situations, it's going to be the parent who provided the most financial support to the student over the previous 12 calendar months. If there was no parent who provided the most, so if you split everything 50-50, it's the parent with the highest income and asset value. Parents are divorced and remarried, it's going to be the parent and step-parent data that goes on the FAFSA. And again, if you're married, if you're remarried filing a joint return, only one of you has to be on the FAFSA as a contributor. If you file separate returns, you both have to be there. Same thing with adoptive parents. On the side where it says no, those are folks who were never contributors on a student's FAFSA. Foster parents are never contributors. If a student is in court-ordered legal guardianship, legal guardians are not contributors on a FAFSA. And anybody else who lives with the student, aunts, uncles, grandparents, older siblings, unless they are an adoptive parent, their data doesn't go on the FAFSA either. For students who answer yes to any of these questions on the FAFSA, they're independent and don't have other contributors that go on their form. For most students coming out of high school, it's rare that they answer yes to these questions. Most students leaving high school aren't 24 or older. They're not veterans of the armed forces. They're not working on advanced degrees. The only question that students do answer on this form that you will get pushback from schools is if you answer yes to that third question from the bottom, which is half of the question that's on the FAFSA. It says, do you have legal dependents other than a spouse? It's asking, does your student have children of their own? The other half of the question says that you provide at least 50% of the support for that dependent. If your student answers yes to that question, the schools on the FAFSA will send you a letter. They will ask you for a copy of your most recent tax return as the student, and they're looking to see that you have enough income to provide that 50% of the support for your own dependent. If you don't, they're going to ask you more questions to figure out who's providing the support for your child. If it's not you, if you're living at home with your parents, they're going to tell you to go back and change your FAFSA question answer to a no, because your parents are the ones providing the 50% of the support for that dependent, and put parent data on your FAFSA. So just as a heads up, if you're in that situation, that's something to prepare for when you fill out your FAFSA. In addition to students who were dependent or independent, which used to be the only categories that you could fall under on the FAFSA, as of 3 years ago when they underwent simplification, there is a new category for students, which is a good thing. What they call provisionally independent. For students who used to fall into these categories, their FAFSA is just used to reject, so schools never got answers on their FAFSA. Now students in these situations, their FAFSA completes, it calculates their student aid index, and it gives them a distinction of provisionally independent. So if students answer yes to any of these questions, it basically says, I'm not independent based on the independent questions, but I can't put parent data on my FAFSA, and this is the reason why. Schools will then see that your FAFSA is marked as a provisionally independent student. they're going to send a follow-up letter, and you're going to have to provide documentation for whichever question you answered yes to. So again, I just point that out to students that if you are in one of these situations, just make sure that you prepare all your documentation, because when the school sends you those letters, you can send them the documentation so they can finish your financial aid for you. It's not that schools are trying to make it harder to process your financial aid or to put roadblocks up for you. They're required to collect this information. That's a federal requirement. They have to confirm your provisional independence before they're able to process your financial aid for you. So once the FAFSA is all done, this is what will happen next. The Department of Education processes your form. It takes about 3 to 5 days once you submit the form to get it processed. All the schools that you list on the form, you can list up to 20 schools at a time. They'll all receive your FAFSA data. So will FIA. FIA will not receive all 20 schools. We only receive the very first school on your list. So if you're looking at schools in state and out of state, list a state school first. One of the schools in the state of Pennsylvania. We use that to determine your Pennsylvania state grant eligibility. Doesn't mean that you have to go to school there. It's just the school that we're going to use. If you pick a school that's out of state or one of the reciprocating states, we're either going to determine $600 maximum eligibility or no eligibility if it's not in a school that or in a state that reciprocates with the state grant program. You'll also receive an email from the Department of Education. They'll send you your FAFSA submission summary. It'll have all the results of your FAFSA, including your student aid index. When you set it up, you do have to do your studentaid.gov account first. When you set that up, make sure you don't use your high school email address. That's something else that we want to point out. High schools turn off access to that email once you graduate, and you have to fill out the FAFSA every single year. If you use your high school email address, you're not going to be able to access that account for subsequent years. So make sure you're using your own personal email address when you set up the account. FIA also uses that email to send you information. We're going to send you an email about a week after your form is done. You're going to get it from a place called Grant Us. That's our Pennsylvania state grant system. You're going to get an application to log in, set up your account, and you want to fill out your Pennsylvania state grant form and your high school form. And that'll allow us to finish the process to determine your full Pennsylvania state grant eligibility. If you're going to a school that wasn't listed first on your FAFSA, so if you change your mind, that's where you can change the school that's going to be listed as your school of choice then. If you change your mind after that, there's a way to get that fixed too. You can just contact the school that you listed, have them go in and submit a cancellation to your Pennsylvania state grant. So they'll cancel you as a student. They'll say the student isn't attending, and then the new school can pick you up as a student. So it's a two-step process, but you can still get it changed after the fact as well. And again, just monitor your email, again, not your high school email. And the Department of Education and FIA will contact you if they need any additional information. Once the schools have all your information, this is where you're going to get your financial aid offers from. So schools will process that information. They're going to send you out their official letter for notification of all your financial aid eligibility. They'll list all the different kinds of financial aid you can get, all your different grants, scholarships, loans, work-study opportunities. They'll tell you how you can accept or reject any of the funds that you want or don't want. Typically, your free money, you don't have to do anything. Schools auto accept that for you. Most students don't want to reject grants and scholarships. You want to take all that free money. Basically, they'll tell you how you can accept or reject your federal student loans or work-study offers. They'll also disclose all your rights and responsibilities for you in order to renew your funding year over year. There is no standard format for a financial aid offer, so I can't tell you when you get your financial aid offers, go to line 4, and that's where all your scholarships and grants are going to be listed. That's not how they work. Schools lay those out any way that they want. Most of them look fairly similar, but they're not going to be universal. So that is just something to keep in mind. Each financial aid offer is going to look a little bit different. Schools design them their own way, so they put their own flair on it. At the end of the day, all you want to do is make sure that when you're looking at that, you know what's your free funding, what are your grants, what are your scholarships, what are the ones that you have to either pay back or do work for, what are the loans, what's work study. So that's all you want to do when you're looking at those, is make sure you're looking at those differences. This is kind of a breakdown on how to compare your financial aid offers. That blue line at the top is cost of attendance. We break it down into 3 different categories. The one on the left, $20,000 a year, that's the average cost for a Pennsylvania state school, Millersville, Slippery Rock, Shippensburg, those types of institutions. Average cost is about $20,000 per year. Middle column, $30,000 a year, is the average state-related school cost. Penn State, University of Pittsburgh, those types of schools. The far right column, average cost for a private school in the state of Pennsylvania is about $50,000 per year right now. The next line down, student aid index, again, $3,000 in this example. Your student aid index doesn't change from school to school. So that is going to be the same at every school you look at. So when they calculate your need, again, cost of attendance minus student aid index, that's going to be your initial need calculation at the school. The pink line is going to be all the free money that the school offers. Again, in this example, when you're looking at schools with a lower cost of attendance typically have lower amounts in their scholarship and grant funding because they're working with a lower net cost. That's just how numbers are going to work. You're typically going to see lower scholarship amounts. Not in every case. Some schools might offer a full financial ride, so you could see a $20,000 scholarship there. All depends on the institution, so it's not to say just apply to schools that are on the left or just apply to schools on the right. You can apply to every type of school. I encourage you to apply to different kinds of schools. Look at those financial aid offers because you're looking at that bottom line out-of-pocket cost. Again, they'll list their loans. Every student's going to qualify for $5,500 in their federal student loans. Some schools will package in other loans. Some schools have institutional loans you can qualify for, so they offer loans to their students that they fund. There's some that will package in federal Parent Plus loans. The federal government offers loans to parents that you can borrow. Some schools put those in their financial aid awards. So again, when you're looking at those awards, make sure when you get to that bottom cost, you're not subtracting loans out of there to get to the lower cost. If schools offer work study, they'll put that in there for you too. So again, when you get to the bottom line, what you want to look at is two different things. Your gap, which is your cost minus all of your aid. That's going to include things like work study and loans. The more important piece is that bottom one, your actual cost. That's your cost of attendance minus all your free money. Again, in this example, the school on the left has your lowest out-of-pocket cost. That's not always the case. So make sure you're looking at each offer. That's how you want to compare them to see who's got your lowest net cost for you. The other thing that does is gives you the opportunity that if there's schools who are on a side where your out-of-pocket cost is way out of range with other schools, you can ask schools to reevaluate your financial aid offer. Don't ask them to negotiate because financial aid offices never negotiate financial aid, but they can reevaluate it for you. So they can take a look at different offers that you have. So if you've got 4 schools and your net costs are pretty close and another school that's way outside of that cost, you can tell them, hey, look, there's 4 schools where my net cost is pretty close, but you guys are way out of range. They may have looked at your FAFSA incorrectly. There may be different data that's on the FAFSA that they didn't pick up. So you want to make sure that they have the opportunity to look at that. They can reevaluate the offer to see if they can get it back in line with your other financial aid offers. The financial aid office will be very honest with you. If you call the financial aid office and ask if they reevaluate, they'll say, yeah, we'll reevaluate your offer. Or they say, no, our first offer is our only offer. So that's something you can call the school and they will tell you for sure. In addition to the FAFSA, there are other forms that may be required at the school. Not every school requires them. The CSS profile is the most common one that you're going to see. That's administered by the College Board, so it's the same folks who administer your SAT tests. If you go to collegeboard.org, it will list all the schools that require the profile. Unlike the FAFSA, it is not free. The FAFSA is the free application for federal student aid. The CSS profile costs $25 for your first application and $16 for each subsequent application you send. So don't send it to every school that you send the FAFSA to. You can send the FAFSA to as many schools as you want. It won't cost you anything. The profile will cost you for each school that you send it to. So just make sure that you're checking to see if the school requires it before you send them the profile. Same thing with the college-specific forms. You're going to see that far less often. But some schools do have their own institutional application for some of their funds. So just check with the school and see if there's any applications that you need to file. The most common form that you're going to see with schools is if you're applying for a legacy scholarship. So if your student's applying to a school that you attended, that their grandparents attended, that an older sibling attended, if they have a legacy scholarship, typically those don't go through the financial aid office and there's a separate application for those. And again, lucky you, you don't get to do this just once. That works with all these forms. If there's the CSS profile is required, you have to refile that each year just like the FAFSA. So just keep that in mind. If the school you go to does require the profile, don't forget to renew that or you're not going to get your institutional funding year over year. So just make sure you fill out both of those forms each year if you have to. Let me go back. That went really far. Okay. So after you get your financial aid offers, the next thing that you're going to want to make sure that you know is that you have all the funding that you need to cover your out-of-pocket costs. Those financial aid offers are just for the first year. So when you look at those offers, if your student is going into a program that requires a 4-year degree, that financial aid offer is going to be for year one. So if your out-of-pocket cost is $5,000, you've got to take that 5,000 times 4. So it's not 5,000 that you have to fund, it's really 20,000. So that's just something to keep in mind when you're looking at those offers. Make sure that you know what you're getting into before you get into that, so that you know you have a plan in place and that's not something that's going to creep up on you after year one. Student debt is the way that most families cover those differences. So you just want to make sure that you're not just taking a loan because you're in a panic and you need to have a loan. Know that there's different options out there. Again, students can borrow money from the federal government. Parents can borrow money from the federal government. There's also private loans. So there's lots of different options out there for you. And these are the breakdowns on the federal student loans currently. So the federal student loans, current interest rate is 6.39%, and there's a 1% processing fee. So the federal government's going to keep $55 off your student's loan before they ever send it to the school, just because they're processing the loan for you. That's the fee they charge to do their part of the loan process. Students can qualify for a subsidized or unsubsidized loan. $2,000 in your offer is always going to be unsubsidized because that's the way the federal government works. Only $3,500 of your $5,500 can be subsidized. Qualification goes all the way back to the second slide we looked at. Cost of attendance minus your student aid index minus your other financial aid. If your difference is $3,500 or more, you can qualify for your subsidized maximum. Difference between the two loans is subsidized loans are principal and interest deferred, while the unsubsidized loans are only principal deferred. So the interest does accrue on those loans every quarter. So that's something, if you don't pay those, they do capitalize. That just means they add on to your principal. And once you graduate, you're effectively paying interest on your interest. So if you can pay that interest every quarter, that works out to your financial benefit as a student. So if you can pay that interest quarterly on your unsubsidized loans, we always suggest that you do that in your financial benefit. Graduate students, so if students go on to advanced degrees, they can borrow loans from the federal government, and so can parents. If you had older students and you utilized the Parent Plus loan in the past, there were changes to the loan this summer. You used to be able to borrow up to your cost of attendance. So you could borrow any difference that your financial aid didn't cover up to the school's cost of attendance. So all their direct and indirect costs, you could borrow that in a Parent Plus loan. That is no longer the option. Parents can only borrow $20,000 per year per student. So that's the most you can borrow in a Parent Plus loan for a student in any given year. And you have an aggregate maximum of $65,000 per student. So for their entire undergraduate program, the most you can borrow is $65,000 in a federal Parent Plus loan. So those are new limitations that were put onto the loan. Private loans are still available up to cost of attendance. So you can still borrow those up to your student's cost of attendance. I don't suggest to borrow up to cost of attendance if you don't have to. If you can not borrow your indirect costs, you don't have to borrow those. Indirect costs, again, they're not billed by the school, so anything that you borrow up to cost of attendance that is not a direct cost, you get that money back as a refund. And students don't typically spend those refund dollars on education costs. They spend them on sneakers and TVs and pizzas and everything that is not school related. So unless you have to borrow those funds and you need them for books and supplies, if you need them for transportation back and forth to campus, don't borrow those funds if you don't have to. Try and pay for those out of pocket, and that'll reduce the amount of borrowing that you need to do. I encourage students to, get a part-time job in between semesters during summer breaks. That's a great way to earn money to pay for those indirect costs out of pocket without having to borrow that year over year. If you're interested in private loans, FIA does offer a loan. It's called the PA Forward Loan. It's available to any Pennsylvania resident. So any student who lives in the state can borrow a PA Forward Loan. Those are our current rates. Doesn't matter if you go to school in-state or out-of-state, you can still borrow a PA Forward Loan. So even if you're looking at going out-of-state, you can still borrow a PA Forward Loan if that's the route you want to go. We do have some other resources that are available. We have a career exploration website. It's theeducationplanner.org. I'll go through these ones kind of quick because most students that are in their senior year kind of know what they want to do, but it allows them to plug in different careers. It'll give you different expected salaries based on different locations in the country. You can pick different colleges and it'll give you estimates on what school is going to cost, what your loans are going to look like. It'll calculate repayments. So basically you pick a career, pick a school, factor in any savings that you have, and it'll give you the results. And you can do that for up to 4 schools at a time. So that is a really cool resource for students. This slide says, what can you do now? This we put in before the FAFSA is open. So what you can do now is you can actually fill out your FAFSA. So I'll go backwards around the circle instead of the way that I normally go. So again, before you can do your FAFSA, you do have to create your studentaid.gov account. You will need an email address. You need your social security number, first name, last name, and birth date. I encourage students, make sure you have your social security number in hand when you set it up. If you put your social security number in wrong, they do an identity verification check, and one of the places they check is the Social Security Administration. If your name and social security number don't match, you're going to get a mismatch error and it's not going to set up your studentaid.gov account. So just make sure everything matches just as it says on your social security card. You used to have to do this about 3 days ahead of time. They do immediate identity verification, which means you can set up your account and do your FAFSA on the same day. So if you didn't set it up early, that's okay. You can still set it up and do your FAFSA on the same day. Now we'll go the other way around the circle. Visit college websites. That's a great place to start looking for schools if you haven't started to narrow down your list. College fairs are a great resource. It's a great way to see a lot of schools in a small amount of time. Neither one of those replace campus visits. You still want to visit campus. But if you've got a list of 18, 20, 25 schools that you're looking at, most families don't want to visit 25 schools. So again, use the websites, use those college fairs. It's a great way to narrow down your list or to find schools that you didn't even know existed. College fairs are great for that. But don't discount those campus visits and make them work for you. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of schools that will offer financial incentives to visit campus. They'll offer scholarships if you go on an open house day or if you go to a new student day. Make sure you visit on those days, because if they're going to offer you a financial incentive to go to campus and you were going to visit anyway, might as well take advantage of that scholarship. There's net price calculators that are out there as well as student aid estimators. For students who are seniors, those become a little bit less useful, especially this time of year. Student aid calculators is going to calculate your student aid index. It's basically a FAFSA estimator. You can do your FAFSA now and you'll have the results within a week. So you can just do your FAFSA. You don't have to do the estimator. But it is a nice tool for students who are in their sophomore, junior year of high school. Same thing with the net price calculators. Each school has a net price calculator on their website. So if you're going to use the net price calculator, that's the place that I suggest to go, not to the federal one that's listed. Not that the federal one is bad, but the school-specific ones are using their financial aid packaging, their cost of attendance. They're giving you a much better estimate of what a financial aid offer is going to look like. But again, for students who are seniors, unless you really, really, really want to know, fill out your FAFSA, send it to the school, and they're going to start sending out those financial aid offers in the next couple of weeks and months. So that's something you can do. If you really want to know, go ahead and do the estimator. If not, just do your FAFSA as soon as possible, and then the schools can start sending out their offers. The next two are the most important things on here. Talk about what's affordable, and students don't have any clue what that means. Students don't know what family finances generally look like. So they don't know what a good financial aid offer is going to look like versus a bad financial aid offer. They don't know what an affordable net price is. You do. Because typically parents are the ones that are co-signing loans or taking Parent Plus loans. So you know what you're willing to co-sign for or to take a loan for. So have those conversations now. They're easier conversations to have this time of year than they are in March, April, May, when schools are starting to look for deposits to start rolling in May 1st, when the national deadline is for depositing. So have those conversations when it's a much more rational conversation than it's going to be an emotional conversation when those deadlines are coming up. And that's when the scholarships come in really handy, because if you have schools that are not quite on that affordable bubble, but they need another $2,000 or $3,000, it's an easy way to incentivize your students to do those scholarship applications they don't necessarily want to do otherwise. Where you can take those schools that are their first or second choice school and bump them into that more affordable category by getting them to do a couple of those scholarship applications. This is a list of different resources that's available. Everything down to the podcast are all FIA resources. FIA.org is our main page. All the rest are different resources. Again, the education planners for career planning. My Smart Borrowing will tell you how to look at different loans and not to overborrow. And you can deal with it. It talks all about loan repayments. 800-692-7392 is our customer service hotline. So if you have questions about any of the grant products or any of the loan questions, you can call our customer service helpline. They can help you with those questions. And we have a local access partner, Tiff Devan. She lives in Dauphin County. She does our local podcast every other Wednesday. They're available. She talks to different folks all across the higher education platform. She has done interviews with TFEC on the podcast. She has talked to folks from Pennsylvania Department of Education, Pennsylvania Department of Treasury, college students, college professors. So it's a really cool podcast with different perspectives from different folks about the higher education landscape. The Federal Aid Info Center, 1-800-433-3243. I'd love to tell you I don't have that phone number memorized. It's 1-800-4FED-AID. I have called them literally hundreds of times. They are a huge help. That is the Department of Education's main helpline. So if you have any FAFSA-related questions, student loan questions, Parent Plus loan questions, that's the place to call. They can help you with those. Studentaid.gov is their main landing page, and if you put in /FAFSA, it'll take you directly to the FAFSA start page. You can stay up to date with FIA. If you sign up with FIA, you can sign up for emails. We'll email you for all of our updates on any of our statewide webinars that we offer. Anything from how to fill out, how to look for scholarships, how to fill out the FAFSA completion nights, all those different things. We email you with those. Just a couple times a year that we send out emails, so it's not overwhelming. Tiff got a second plug somehow for her podcast. Where any place that you can find podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, iHeartRadio. We have our own YouTube channel, so you can find that anywhere that you want. We're also on all the different social media sites. We're at Facebook, X, Instagram, LinkedIn, so you can follow FIA at any of those social media resources. Again, we have our student aid guide digital as well, so if you didn't grab one from the table, you can also download the digital version. And when you get the slide deck, there are page numbers on the top of the slides that correlate to that student aid guide. So if there's any topics that we went over that you want to go get some more information on, rather than just having to dig through the book aimlessly, if you go to those slides, it'll reference back to what pages they are in the student aid guide, and it'll tell you where to kind of look for that information at. Again, that's all my contact information. If you guys have any questions, I'll be glad to answer those now. If not, do you have anything else for them? No. If not, then you're free to go. Thank you so much for attending this evening. You're welcome.